Well, good morning, viewers. Today we have a 2006 Chevy Malibu with a mighty 2.2 Ecotech 4-cylinder, and it's here because it runs very bad. Check engine light is flashing, and the customer said he's already changed the spark plugs in this thing and it didn't make any difference. Now this has the coil pack assembly on top of the engine. Let's have a look at the action of the check engine light. You can feel it like it's running on 3 cylinders or 2 cylinders. There goes the flashing check engine light. So we're going to throw a scanner on it and see if it's random misfire or a specific cylinder. So this is a new vehicle record, so we've never scanned it before. See if it'll auto ID the vehicle. Yes, it did. I'm not going to bother with the odometer reading, but I'll get it later. Let's do a network code scan and see what controllers respond, although we know it's a misfire problem because of the flashing MIL. He's got a coolant thermostat. I think he did say that the engine light was on prior to this misfiring. 9 computers reported, probably 10. No, only 9. Low voltage, random multi-cylinder misfire. So we're going to go into the engine and data display and misfire data, and it should show the misfire accumulated over the last 10 drive cycles. So what do you think? Think it's cylinder number 1 with 10,230 misfires? Why is that random misfire, GM? I think that's P0300. Well, let's have a look at the spark plugs that were taken out of this thing. So I had a look at the plugs. The customer put in a set of NGK iridiums. The ones that came out had no signs of carbon tracking, nor did they look seriously bad. So we're going to go ahead and pull the coil pack off and check spark on cylinder number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So remove the 4 fasteners that hold the coil pack down, and this is cylinder number 1 here, closest to the front is the engine, and I don't see any signs of carbon tracking in the boot. It looks pretty good. Now, one of the challenges that we have is that we don't have spark plug wires, so we're going to take the boots off here and put 4 spark plug wires on this thing so we can run it. So I've got 3 repurposed plug wires off of a Ford V8 6.2, I believe it was, and I actually made these by putting male ends on or female ends on both ends of the plug wires from the 8 that was in the set. So I've got a spark tester installed on number 1. This is a way spark coil. There's 2 coils in it, so it fires 2 spark plugs at once. So if we got no spark on this coil spark tester here, then we need a coil pack. So I'm going to start it up and see what we've got. Let's try adjusting the spark tester down to see if we got a weak spark. Got no spark at all. So we need to check that drive circuit to make sure that it's working. So I decided, because it's way spark, that I'm going to check the companion cylinder, which on this thing is number 4. It's 1 and 4, 3 and 2. So I'm going to check for spark on number 4. Number 4 doesn't count misfires, but that doesn't mean it's not misfiring. So we'll pull this wire off here. I'll put the spark tester on here and adjust it out to about 30,000 volts. If I've got spark on number 4 but not on number 1, then I definitely need a coil. If I got no spark on number 4 as well, then I might have a drive transistor problem in the computer wiring. Well, that's not good. Okay, we're going to check the drive transistors. So here's what I've done. I've installed a universal breakout harness on the 5 wires to the ignition control module. It has an ignition control module on this model. The way Spark ones do, the integrated ones don't. And that's unfortunate because I have no way of knowing whether this problem is the drive transistor in the integrated control module or if it's the coil pack. But we're going to look at the signals going in. This white wire is attached to this white wire right here, which is ignition timing A. It would be nice if GM would say that's cylinder 1 and 4, but don't make any assumptions. And ignition timing B, which is a 5-volt pulse. And so I've got it pinned up here. We're going to have a look at the waveform on this 2-channel lab scope. See that we got the signals coming from the module at least, or from the ECM at least. So here we go. I'm going to start it up. So you can see I got 2 5-volt pulses. So the ECM is telling the ignition control module to fire the coil, but either the module has failed or the coil has failed. Unfortunately, there's no simple way to get in between the two. So I've ordered up a coil, well, hopefully that fixes it. It should be easy enough to install and try it. So I realized if I take the coil and separate the module from the coil pack, there are 4 wires that are used in there. Obviously one is power, one is ground, and the 2 negative side of the coil. But I don't know which one because the schematic just shows the connector going up to the ignition control module, doesn't show the connections inside the module. So if I turn the key on, I've got 12 volts on 3 of these wires and 0.5 on 1 wire. So that would tell me the coils are not open. I've got ignition power to it. But when I start it and run it, I've only got an ignition waveform on 1 of the wires. I wonder if there's a simple way I could qualify which is the power, which is the ground. Like I said, they don't show you the wires coming off of this that go to the actual coil pack here. But I'm starting to lean towards, if it was a failed primary, I should have an open in that primary. And if it was a failed secondary, I should still have a primary waveform. I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm just going to take the channel 1 probe here and connect it into 1 pin. And it reads 11.8 with the key on. This circuit reads 11.8 with the key on. And this circuit reads 11.8 with the key on. This circuit I'm assuming is ground because it reads 0.05. So one of these should remain live all the time because it would be the common power supply to the 2 coils, and the other would be the negative side of the coil control. So if I start it now, I should have a waveform on 2 of those 3 wires. So I'm doing on the first one here. You can see there's nothing appearing there. Going on the second one, nothing appearing on that one. Go on the third one, and I got an ignition waveform. So I got a perfect looking ignition waveform. Well, peak firing voltage, burn time, coil oscillations, the whole 9 yards. But I don't have that on the other 2 wires. Of course, one wire should be 12 volts all the time, the battery voltage. The other one should do the same kind of a signal. So that tells me that the primary winding in the coil is not open. But I'm starting to lean towards needing a control module and not a coil pack. So I better get both just to be on the safe side. I hate being a parts changer, but sometimes it's hard to justify analyzing things when you could just simply throw a part on it. Now, obviously the module is non-returnable if you take it out of the package. Now, I do have a ground wire on here, and I did ground the coil while I was doing this test too, just in case it needed to be grounded. It appears to be grounded here. See, I got a ground wire on this coil pack on one of the ears here, and I've got a ground because that looks like this is grounded here, so I've grounded it just to be safe. I don't know if it requires it, but obviously can't hurt to have that ground. So there's a 6-wire connector going into the coil, looking at it from the bottom, and this pin I've determined is ground. The second pin from the end is ignition power, and these are the 2 coil negative controls. This pin here is not used, and this one is not used. So you can see the actual white wire ends up being ground here on my test probe, my back pinning probes. So I'm going to set up to read the resistance of the primary side of the coil. So I'm going on 1 control wire, and it reads 0.42. Go on the second control wire, and it reads 0.42. If I use any other arrangement, I'll get a higher reading, because I'll get about 0.8 because of the 2 coils are in pair or in series in there. If you pick the wrong one as the power source in. So the primary side of the ignition coil is not open nor shorted, and I knew it wasn't open because of the voltage reading on it. Nobody has an ignition control module in stock in town here, believe it or not. And I doubt the coil is going to fix it. I'm going to get a coil and put it on and try it, but I really doubt the coil is going to fix it. I believe it's an ignition module that's failed here, the ignition control unit. It's unfortunate this is not like the newer ones where they put the transistors integrated in the coil and you end up getting both by default. The newer ones have got 4 coils in them and 4 drive transistors. This one is a separate part, so you can't, well, you end up having to buy 2 pieces here, and you don't get both pieces because they're integrated. So here's the situation. Could not source a new ignition control module for this thing in town overnight, but about between $200 and $250 for this thing. I managed to buy or acquire a used assembly. Now I got a used assembly with the coil pack and the module for $100. Now the problem with this design is an intermittently shorting coil could take out the drive transistor in the computer, or sorry, the drive transistor in the ignition control module, and the ignition control module could actually damage the coil. So it would be wise to change both. But what I've done is I've temporarily installed the used module in place of the original one. I'm going to start it up now and see if we've got ignition waveforms on both circuits. It's definitely running on 4 cylinders now. Let's change the time base here and have a look at an ignition waveform. So let's change this to channel 2 now. Definitely got the same pattern. I'm sure the plugs are fouled with all that extra fuel in there, but it's definitely running on 4 cylinders now. So there's ignition coil control number 1. And I've actually figured it out on the coil pack, which is which here. Anyways, I'll include that in the description. So I am going to change the whole coil pack assembly just because I got a complete assembly used. And like I said, a failed coil could take out the transistor in the module. So just to be safe, we're going to change it as an assembly. So looking at these, there's 4 wires. There's actually 6 terminals, but only 4 of them are used. The yellow one is coil control A, I believe. The green terminal here now is the ignition power. The blue terminal is coil control B, and the white terminal is a reference low or a ground. And that's how they arrange in the 6 pins in there. So we're going to go ahead and install this coil pack assembly in place of the new one, or the new used one in place of the old one. I'm going to go into the engine control computer here in the codes menu and clear the codes. And go into data, misfire data, and we're going to start this thing up. Remains to be seen now is if he's done some kind of damage to the catalyst by running it. I don't think he did. He only ran it for about 20 kilometers. No more misfires. Let's look at engine data. I'll load up the data and come back. So it's just gone into closed loop now. It's still warming up. What's the temperature of it? It's probably in the other data list, but I just started. It's only been running for a couple minutes. So you can see bank 1 sensor 1 is switching rich lean. Bank 1 sensor 2, which is after the cat, that's used for catalyst monitoring, is starting to clean up. We need to take this thing for a good run, clean out the cat. It's only 42 Celsius, so we'll let it run for a little while and see if it cleans up a bit. So now I got running at a fast idle about 1450. You can see bank 1 sensor 1 catalyst, or the OT sensor, is switching rich lean nicely. And bank 1 sensor 2, which is the post catalyst sensor, is more or less flatlining. I think we'll be okay. So we'll call this one fixed.